Some stories don't start with a scream or a shadow in the corner of a room. They start with a choice. Usually, it's a good choice, the kind of thing a decent person does. That's how it was for a man named David. David was a 40-year-old middle school teacher. He lived a quiet life in a suburb outside of Columbus. He was the guy who returned his shopping cart. He tipped 20% even for bad service and always stopped to help if he saw someone struggling. It was that specific trait, that compulsion to be a good man, that ended up being his undoing. It was a Tuesday night, just after 10. The air was starting to get that sharp autumn bite to it. David was leaving a 24-hour grocery store, pushing a cart with just a few bags in it. The parking lot was one of those massive, sprawling concrete deserts lit by flickering orange sodium lamps. It made everything look slightly jaundiced. It was mostly empty, save for a few rusted sedans scattered near the back. As David reached his SUV, he noticed a small figure standing near a concrete light base about 30 feet away. It was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. She was wearing a pale yellow sundress. That looked far too thin for the October chill, and her hair was tied back in 2 neat, slightly frayed braids. She wasn't crying, she wasn't moving, she was just standing there, looking at the ground. In her hands, she held a stack of papers. David felt that immediate, cold prickle of concern. A kid alone in a dark parking lot at 10 at night is a red flag for any rational adult. He walked toward her, keeping his movement slow and his hands visible. He didn't want to scare her. "Hey there," he said, his voice soft. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl didn't look up at first. She just held out one of the papers. Her hands were tiny, but David noticed her fingernails were perfectly clean, unusually clean for a kid playing outside. David took the paper. It was a missing child flyer. The ink looked fresh, almost like it had just come off a laser printer. In the center was a photo of the very girl standing in front of him. Same dress, same braids, same vacant expression. Below the photo, in bold black letters, it read, "Missing since October 12th. David checked his watch. Today was October 12th. "Is this you?" David asked, his heart starting to hammer against his ribs. "Did someone take you? Where did you come from?" The girl finally looked up. Her eyes were wide and dark, reflecting the orange glow of the parking lot lights like 2 oily marbles. She didn't say a word. She just pointed to the back of the flyer. David flipped it over. Scrawled in a messy, frantic hand was an address. 422nd Blackwood Lane. "I need to go home," she whispered. Her voice was flat. No tremor, no fear, just a statement of fact. Now, David knew he should have called the police. He actually had his phone in his hand. But the girl suddenly reached out and gripped his forearm. Her fingers were like ice, and the strength in her grip was jarring. It wasn't the grasp of a frightened child. It was a clamp. "Please," she said. "The police can't go there. They told me. They told me only you could take me." In the moment, David's brain skipped the "how would she know my name?" and went straight to save the child. He helped her into the back seat of his SUV and buckled her in. She sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, at the back of his headrest. As they pulled out of the lot, the silence in the car became heavy. David tried to talk to her, to ask her about her parents or how she ended up at the store, but she remained mute. He noticed her looking out the side window as they turned onto the main road. Her lips were moving. She was counting. 10, she whispered. David glanced in the rearview mirror. 10 what, honey? 9, 8. A weird, hollow feeling opened up in David's stomach. They were heading toward Blackwood Lane, a stretch of road that ran alongside a dense patch of undeveloped woods. There were no streetlights there, and the houses were spaced half a mile apart. 7, 6. David slowed the car down. The counting wasn't childlike. It was rhythmic, like a metronome. It was the sound of a clock ticking toward 0. "Look, I'm gonna pull over," David said, his voice shaking now. "I'm going to call someone to help us, okay? This isn't right." He began to pull onto the shoulder, his tires crunching over the gravel. 5, 4. David looked at the GPS. They were coming up on the address. But there was no house at 422nd Blackwood. It was just a gap in the trees, a dirt pull-off, where people usually dumped old tires or construction debris. 3, 2... The girl leaned forward, her face suddenly inches from David's ear. He could smell her now. She didn't smell like a kid, she smelled like wet earth and copper. 1, she growled. Suddenly, two blinding sets of high beams exploded into life from the darkness of the woods. A massive, blacked-out pickup truck roared out from the trees, accelerating with terrifying speed. Before David could even shift the car into reverse, the truck slammed into his driver's side door with the force of a wrecking ball. The world turned into a chaotic blur of shattering glass and white nylon as the airbags deployed. David's head snapped against the side window, and everything went dark for a few long, agonizing seconds. When his vision finally cleared, his ears were ringing with a high-pitched whine. He was pinned in his seat. The steering wheel pressed hard against his chest. Through the haze of smoke and dust, he looked toward the back seat. The rear door was wide open. The girl was gone. David struggled to breathe, his ribs screaming in protest. He looked out the broken windshield and saw the black truck idling just a few feet away. Two men stepped out. They weren't wearing masks. They were dressed in plain, dark work clothes, moving with a terrifying, calm precision. One of them walked to the passenger side of the truck and opened the door. The little girl in the yellow dress hopped out. She wasn't crying. She wasn't hurt. She walked over to the man, took his hand, and looked at David's wrecked SUV with a look of pure clinical boredom. "Good job, Maya," the man said. His voice was gravelly but calm. "You got a live one." The man reached into his pocket and handed her a fresh stack of flyers. The girl nodded and climbed back into the truck. As the other man approached David's door with a crowbar and a heavy, opaque plastic sheet, David realized what the girl had been counting. She wasn't counting the seconds until he was safe. She was counting the distance to the kill zone. The last thing David saw before the man shattered what was left of his window was the girl looking back at him from the truck's rear window. She held up a new flyer against the glass. It wasn't a picture of her, it was a picture of David taken from his own social media profile. The text at the bottom didn't say missing, it said, "in stock." Then the truck's lights turned off and the woods went silent once again.